Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna, this is Coffee, Books, and Bullet Journals, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of June. Alright guys, so another month has come and gone, and we're in the second half of the year now. So yeah, that's a thing that has happened. So I managed to have a pretty good reading month for the month of June. A lot of these though are audiobooks because I spent a lot of time in my car, but like that's nothing new on this channel. And yeah, we're just gonna go with that. So I have some nerdy stats written down. I'm gonna talk about them, and then we will talk about the books that I read, from the book that I liked the least to the book that I liked the most, which was not easy this month. So like I said, 13 books, which ended up being 3,957 pages. That is because I read a couple of graphic novels. So I read 5 young adult books and 8 adult books, which is pretty good. I tend to normally read more young adult, I guess. I don't know, maybe not. I'd like to be able to see that like statistic month to month. But Smutathon was this month, and so obviously I was reading more adult books than YA, so it kind of evened it out. So 2 contemporary, 2 graphic novels, like I was saying, 4 romance, 3 of those being contemporary romance and 1 being paranormal romance, 3 fantasy, 1 nonfiction, finally, like I've read my first nonfiction of the year, so praise bless, and 1 thriller. So yeah, read a few arcs, which is why I read a lot of ebooks. I read, where's that thing? 5 audiobooks, like I was saying, 5 ebooks, and then only 3 physical books this month. So, oops. Only two of the books that I read this month counted towards the Pop Sugar Challenge. That's not necessarily surprising because I'm kind of starting to get into that, the books that maybe take a little bit more work, that maybe like some of the prompts, almost any book would fit that prompt. Now we're starting to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty. So, authors, I read 10 female authors, 1 male author, 1 non-binary author, and 1 that was like a collection of short stories. So there was male, female, non-binary, a whole bunch of people in that collection, which I will talk about here in a minute. Star rating, 3.77 was my average for the month, so not too bad. I say that anything above 3.5 as an average is pretty dang good, because that means I'm reading pretty good books. I had 1 1.5 star, 1 2 star, 1 3 star, 3 3.5 star, 2 4 star, and 4 5 star books. So, yeah, and only one of those 5 stars was a reread, so I found some new favorites, which is pretty cool. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the books that I read this month. Alright, the first book that I will be talking about will be my 1.5 star book, and that was Elizabeth and the Clan of Dragons, and that was by Ava Mason. This I read as part of Smutathon for a book that I could read in one day and out of my comfort zone, because I don't ever read paranormal romance. And if this is any indication as to why I don't read paranormal romance, it was terrible. I mean, obviously, I know that there are better paranormal romances out there. I was trying to find an audiobook that was super short, and this one was like 2 hours long. Let's be honest. So, this was like I said, a paranormal romance about a shifter, like mafia, I guess. And she hadn't like transferred into her shifting powers or something like that. And then she has this, her like clan are like wolves, and she hasn't been able to like shift into a wolf, even though like she's supposed to be the alpha. It was super weird. And then she meets this group of other shifters that turn into dragons, and it was like this whole reverse harem experience, and it was rough. It was rough. It was a very short novella. It only had 114 pages. It was supposed to be like a first in the series. I think there's like 7 or something in this series, but like for me, a book has to be able to stand on its own, even though it's the first in a series. And this one did not at all. it was just so, like, there were so many things that they were just, like, beginning to explore, and nothing got resolved, and, like, we didn't have any character development. I didn't care about these characters, and the sex. Let's talk about the sex for a second. It was cringy. It was bad. I have not read anything that bad in a very, 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 very long time. Anyways, that was 1.5 stars. I don't recommend it at all. It was bad. But you know what? It's Smutathon. Not everything you read is good. It's okay. The next book was my 2-star book, and it was also part of Smutathon, and this was Vicious by L.J. Shen. This was a bad boy type romance about this really rich kid and then the, like, maid's daughter, and so it starts out like 10 years before when they're both in high school, and then, like, it jumps back and forth from present day back to the flashbacks of 10 years before. I really had high expectations for this book because a lot of people that have very similar reading taste to me really, really enjoyed it, and they thought it was really good, really smutty. And first off, like, I got to at least 50% before the first sex even happened. So I don't even, it might have even been longer than that. I don't really remember, but it was, yeah, very slow burn. In A Hate to Love, you still, like, have to want the two characters to end up together, and I didn't care at all. So unfortunately, that one just did not do it for me. The other thing I really, really didn't like was the fact that Vicious, the main character, or the love interest, instead of, like, actually using her name, even in their, like, adult, like, more they, like, she was just an employee at the time. Like, she wasn't the kid. Like, anyway, what am I trying to say? The nickname that he gave her when she was a kid was The Help, and he continued to use that instead of, like, actually calling her name. To be honest, I don't even remember what her name was because he just kept saying The Help, and that irritated me just a little bit. So anyways, 2 stars, unfortunately. All right, my 3-star book of the month was a graphic novel called Genderqueer, and this is actually a graphic memoir. So memoirs are hard to rate, and so I don't tend to rate them based on the story, but more based on the structure. Like, I can't fault a book for its narrative because it's a true story. So what I try to critique memoirs on is the ability to tell said story and how well they went about doing that, and how much I was able to glean from the structure of the story versus the actual story itself, if that makes sense. That being said, I'm rating this a 3-star, not based on the story, but based on just how the story was written. Does that make sense? Had this been a fiction story, I would have had some serious problems with how the family treated them, and how the certain characters were played out. But I can't fault that because it's a memoir. It's their true story. So this book, or this graphic novel, was a story about Maya, who uses er pronouns, classified female at birth, and then kind of that whole story, and trying to find out their sexual orientation and their identity. And it was very enjoyable, and I loved, let me rephrase that. I loved the honesty in this book. There was just so much truth, and, like, it was very heartfelt, and you could really feel the author's heart and soul being just bared out on the page. That I enjoyed. What I didn't like, which I tend to find problems with a lot of memoirs that do this, and that is, it's not a linear story, and so we would bounce back and forth from childhood to college, back to childhood to high school, and it was a little bit confusing to follow, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, that was, like, my big criticism of it, and because of what I'm having, like, I have to base a memoir solely on structure. That was a big problem for me. So still very much enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. It was on Hoopla, so if your library supports that, I do highly recommend that you pick this up. All right, my first 3.5-star book I buddy read with Kaylee over at the Dog-Eared page during Summerathon, and that was With a Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. I feel like I'm definitely in the minority with this book. I know that so many people love this book, but I felt like there were some problematic things in it. Things that I loved about this book. I loved Imani's relationship with her daughter. I loved her relationship with her grandmother. I loved the little budding relationship that was going on in their cooking class. Very, very adorable. I also really liked the food aspect of it. So she's a high school student who really wants to be a chef, and so she takes this culinary arts class, and there were some things like that they talked about, like the more technical things, which like I identified with because that's what I do for a living. Like they literally talked about the serve safe class, which I thought was pretty cool. Things I did not like about this book. This author said or wrote, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Not once, not twice, 3 times in this book. I really thought we just were doing this ironically at this point. I really didn't think that like authors actually truly wrote that on books that were published in 2019. So that was a problem. I also did not like how convenient everything happened. So I'm not gonna like spoil it, but like she would have a situation with the baby's father, and the next page it was resolved. Then we would have a problem with money, and then a check shows up, and it was just like, can we have a little bit of a struggle? Just a little bit. So yeah, that kind of definitely deterred me from the book, or from the story, kind of took me out of it. Still enjoyed it. I loved the atmosphere of it. The trip to Spain was very interesting. And I enjoyed reading it. It's not a favorite of mine, unfortunately. All right, the next 3.5-star book that I read was also part of Smutathon, and that was Royally Endowed by Emma Chase. I read Royally Screwed last year, I think during Smutathon, and that was the first book in the series. I thought this was the second book in the series. It's actually the third book, so I haven't read the second one. They're all companions. They all like follow the same people, but it's fine. Like reading the third one did not take anything. Like I didn't miss anything not having read the second one, if that makes any sense. So I really enjoyed this book. It was super sexy and the slowest of burns. I think we were at like 60% before we even started talking about sex, which was great. I listened to a lot of this on my way home from New York on like the very first day of Smutathon, which was great. And because part of it takes place in New York, which was pretty cool because I just, left there. But yeah, I love books that have royalty and politics and, that are like smudged in there. So yeah, this was definitely something that I enjoyed, and it was a very light and fluffy read. There was a little bit of a suspense thriller aspect to it, but it was very quickly resolved. But that's pretty much to be expected with romances. So yeah, I very much enjoyed it. 3.5 stars, and yeah, it's a good series. It's very well written, and I enjoyed it. All right, the next 3.5-star book that I read, I actually read during Summerthon because I had seen it in a lot of Smutathon vlogs, and this was a graphic novel called Super Fun Sexy Times. I get the words all mixed up, but yes, Super Fun Sexy Times. Very queer, very sexy, like on-page sexiness. There's lots of penises, lots of vaginas on the page. Graphic novels that are like sexy or interesting because of that, and it was like I was like reading it on my phone, and I'm like, don't look. It's yeah. Anyways, very good. So it was a collection of basically 5 stories with like superheroes and supervillains being sexy. So it was very cute and sexy, and yeah, there's not a lot to say about it. The thing I did not like about it was that like once you would, because they were so short, because it was like 5 stories within one graphic novel, and they didn't build on each other. They were completely different characters. So once you really started feeling for said character, they would be over. So, but there was great representation in this. There was a plus size main character. There was a trans character. There was so much queerness. It was great. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this is an arc that comes out August 20th. So coming up pretty soon, and that might be one that I pick up a hard copy of. So, all right, my 4-star read, my first 4-star read. I think it might be my only one. We'll see. I clearly cannot think today. So anyways, my 4-star read for the month was The Wicked King by Holly Black. I also gave The Cruel Prince 4 stars, but I think I liked this one a little bit more. But I think that part of the problem with this book is I was behind the hype, and so the hype kind of got me. And I was expecting a lot more from this book. I was expecting to just be completely blown away. And unfortunately, I just don't care about Jude or Cardin enough to like really be invested in this story. I still enjoyed it. Like I was saying earlier, I love politics in books, and even fantastical ones. So that was one of the reasons why I initially picked up this series to begin with, is because I knew it was kind of a political fantasy, which I enjoy. I do like those, and I did like that part of it. I just didn't really care enough about the characters. So will I reread these for Fairython? Yes. Will I pick up Queen of Nothing on November 19th? Yes. Like I care enough about that, but it's not like, this is not an all-time favorite. It's not my favorite fantasy series that I've read. And I'll talk a little bit about, because I read I concluded another fantasy series this month as well, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But I think coming off the heels of that to this, I was just a little bit disappointed. I did have another 4-star read, and that was The Other F Word, and this was by a collection of YA authors and other people. There were some editors, there were some plus size models. So this was all about being fat and fierce and happy, and it was really, really well done. A lot of kids these days, or high schoolers these days, they really just can't see themselves in books, and so they have a lot of self-confidence issues, and I feel like this kind of broke that out of the box and kind of turned it on its head, and it was really, really good. Most of this book did exactly what it was supposed to do, and that was to empower girls and women that are plus size to be fabulous, and I loved that. The problem is, and the reason, and like short stories and collections, like they'll never get 5 stars, because there will always be 1 or 2 that you're like, that one wasn't great. There were a couple of these stories that were more self-promotion of their own work than actually like an essay about female empowerment. You know, it was like 90% of it was really, really good. And then you would get to that one that would be like, so basically you're just telling me to go read your blog. Because I didn't get anything out of this story. It was more of a teaser to read your own work or buy my book or something, you know what I mean? And so it was just like that kind of like disappointed me a little bit. But like I said, the majority of it still very good, and I highly recommend it. So this was another arc that I received from NetGalley, and this one comes out on September 24th. Moving on to my 5-star books. I thought I had a 4.5-star book, but clearly I don't know how to work Excel, because that book, it was my first July read. So I can booktube. Just, you know, anyway, so 5-star reads. I'm going to start with my reread, and that was Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Neon. Like I said, I reread this in anticipation for Girls of Storm and Shadow, which I do have the arc of, and I'm planning on reading this month. I had tried to read it last month. It didn't work. You know, life got in the way. I was just reading way too much fantasy at the time, so I had to set it down. But I'm gonna read it probably during reading rush. But anyways, Girls of Paper and Fire. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy. I've talked about this on my channel a ridiculous amount of times. I love this book. This is about a group of girls who basically are the concubines for the Demon King, and 2 of the girls just decide that they are that's not gonna happen. We're not gonna do that. So that's why they're Girls of Fire. So they're paper cast girls. See? This book went around BookTube a lot at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, and so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it, but I'm very, very excited to read the second book, and yeah. I know this book has really mixed reviews, and there's a lot of people that don't like the writing style of it. I actually decided to listen to this one on audio on my reread. I don't know how I feel about, like, you know, physical versus audio on this one. There's some that, like, you can really obviously tell, but I do physically like reading this. I like Natasha's writing style, but I totally understand it's a personal thing, but yeah. definite favorite for me. My next 5-star read this month was Finale by Stephanie Garber, and this is the third and final book in the Caraval trilogy. Well, I say it's the third and final book, but it does kind of end on a... Is it the end? Is it not the end? So I don't know. Stephanie may decide to add more books to it, but first off, we're going to talk about how gorgeous this cover is because it's beautiful. And then... I really enjoyed this book. There are a lot of things in the Caraval series that I didn't necessarily like going into it, but reading this book really answered a lot of the reasons behind why Stephanie put both things in both Caraval and Legendary, which I'm not going to spoil, but just know that like if you didn't necessarily love Caraval, this book explains a lot of the things that you didn't love about it. That's all like the clues I can give you about that. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the plot of this book, obviously, because this follows directly on the heels of Legendary. And if you haven't read Legendary, this book, or even like hearing very basic reviews of this book, will spoil it. In fact, I did not even read the synopsis until I finished Legendary because I didn't want to be spoiled at all. After reading this is that fantasy series I was talking about. I loved this so much and it really ignited my like love for the whole series. So I highly recommend like if you read Caraval and didn't love it, read the next book, read Legendary, give it a chance, and then read this one. All right, my next read my next 5-star read was a book that I read during Smutathon, and that was The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren. I was hesitant to pick this up because I didn't love Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. Like I gave it 4 stars, but it was like a low 4-star, and it just wasn't, like it didn't blow me away. This blew me away. I love this. This is my favorite Christina Lauren book to date. Maybe not talking about autobiography. I don't know. Like it's hard to like rate their young adult book versus the rest of their adult books. But as far as like their contemporary books, this is my favorite by far. I loved this. I loved the Hate to Love, and it was... Their like dynamics between the two were so good. So if you haven't heard about this is about Olive, and her sister is getting married, and her sister likes to get bargains about, you know, all these different types of like, she basically tried to like get this bargain wedding, and she has a she gets the seafood buffet for her wedding, and everyone gets sick except for Olive, who has a seafood allergy, and Ethan? Yes, Ethan. I read way too much romance this month. Ethan, who basically just doesn't like buffets, so he doesn't eat it. And so then Ethan and Olive have to take the honeymoon because it's a budget honeymoon and they won it in a giveaway. And if they don't send someone, or if they don't go on the honeymoon, then they lose it. And because Olive is the twin sister and then Ethan is the brother of the groom, they are able to basically fake go on this honeymoon to Hawaii. And it was funny, it was sexy, it was so good. So highly recommend this, obviously. Also, that one talked about food safety in it too. When I first heard the synopsis about it, and everyone was saying that they got seafood poisoning after the wedding, then I was like, wait a minute, seafood poisoning doesn't happen that fast. Like, food poisoning is like several hours. But he had said something about, he goes, no, it's not food poisoning, it's ciguatera. And I was like, yes, that is what it is. I knew that. So anyways, moving on. So this is probably my favorite book of the month. But it's so hard. It's so hard to tell, like, what is my favorite book this month, because I had some really, really good ones. But that is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. I read this on the recommendation of Mel from Mel to the Any and Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads, and highly, highly enjoyed this so much. There are some really high reviews on this, and then there's some people that really didn't like it, mostly because the whole story, the plot revolves around Georgie, who is the youngest daughter of this family that's like really well known in this city, and she's a clown, and she basically can't get her family to take her seriously. So, and then Travis is back in town because he was a baseball player who got injured and basically kind of got cut from his team, and so he's moving back to his hometown. And then he and Georgie obviously like start this relationship. They're basically helping each other out. They're doing like a fake dating to basically help each other out. He's trying to empower her and basically like get her family to take her seriously. She's trying to make it seem like he is a stable person so that he can get a commentator job, and a stable person in a stable relationship. I clearly don't know how to talk. And there's like, during some of the sex scenes, or just in general, he would call her baby girl, and a lot of people don't like that just because like he's the one that's supposed to be seeming like she's an adult. But I really liked it. So, I mean, like I said, it's a personal taste thing, and I tend to try not to judge smutty books based on their preferences, I guess. Just because like I may not like, that may not turn me on, but like clearly turns Georgie on. So anyways, enough sex talk on my channel. So anyway, this is a very, very steamy, sexy, very smutty book. Tessa Bailey is the new queen of smut, in my opinion, because it revolves around like this house flipping and, you know, construction type of thing. This was what I wanted 99% Mine to be. This had like all of those little aspects of 99% Mine that I wanted, like the second chance romance and, you know, moving back to a small town type of thing, but done so much better. So if you didn't like 99% Mine, but you kind of really wanted to, you should pick this book up. All right, guys, so those are the books that I read in the month of June. It's funny because last month, all the books that I read, I had physical copies of, and this one I only have 6. So there's that. So anyways, if you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button down below the video that you can do so if you would like, and all of the links to my social media, my other social media platforms are in the description below if you would like to be my friend on any other platform. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!